The road to success is not an easy one. It requires an obsessive drive to realize your dream. An irrepressible passion to be the best. But one misstep can be costly. And the price of success can be unimaginable. Just ask Blaine Norris and Brian Trimble, two computer geeks who dreamt of making their own horror film.
Action!
They were willing to do anything to make their movie happen. But what Blaine and Brian didn't realize is making a slasher film can be murder. Harrisburg is a sleepy mid-sized city with a blue-collar industrial history. Not exactly the kind of place you'd expect to find the next big Hollywood duo, especially in the form of two 20-something computer techs, Blaine Norris and Brian Trimble.
Blaine Norris just came across as a geek or a nerd. He was about average build, dirty blonde hair, height 5'10". There wasn't anything that really stood out about him.
Blaine was always talking about video games, the latest and gadgets that were out.
He was always talking about horror films. Blaine wanted to be like your typical horror film director, but he didn't look anything like a filmmaker.
We all have our tics and things like that. Blaine's just happened to be horror movies. He was an encyclopedia of horror films. He liked that kind of stuff. He told his wife, there is no reason why I couldn't shoot something that would get produced.
September 2001. Blaine is in the office, but instead of working, he's doing what he does every single day, trying to come up with the perfect concept for a horror movie. And he's not alone. Joining him in the fantasizing is his fellow tech, horror film lover, and good buddy, Brian Trimble.
Brian was just easygoing, laid-back person that loves photography.
Brian was normal in every sense of the word. Had, short, dark hair, clean shaven. I didn't think there was anything out of the ordinary about Brian.
Brian wanted to be a cinematographer, and he and Blaine had this joint passion together, which really underscored their friendship.
Hey, Blaine, smile.
Brian and Blaine, two average guys with a passion for horror films. And that shared connection created a fast and strong friendship.
You know what I want to do? I would love to make my own movie. Write my own.
And while Blaine wants to direct,
Me too. Really? That would be so awesome, man.
Brian has always harbored a secret desire to be a film cinematographer.
I have the equipment. We can shoot it.
It seems like fate has brought them together.
Let's make one. Come on, I'll write it, Dad.
Blaine and Brian both had average jobs, but Blaine was clearly the more ambitious of the two.
No.
And I think that's what drew Brian to Blaine. He was drawn to Blaine's excitement. Blaine was destined for Hollywood, and he was going to bring Brian with him.
Serious about it? Yeah.
All right, let's do it.
Brian and Blaine spend the winter writing the script, and by spring, they're done. The two computer geeks from the middle of Rust Belt, Pennsylvania have done it. Their dream film is closer than ever to becoming a reality. And by June, they're ready to take on another huge step and begin casting.
I can't remember what all they were. You can just tell me what you want me to do.
Okay.
I saw a casting notice in a local newspaper.
Why don't you come join me in my mind?
Said it was an independent horror film, and they were doing the local auditions.
He convinced me to come and audition.
Didn't mean to scare me. What'd you think was gonna happen? You snuck up on me in the dark.
He was very ambitious. He told me that this was his first movie that he was doing, but he had all the confidence in the world that he could pull this off. The title of the film was Through Hike, A Ghost Story. About 5 college-age friends.
Take 8, marker. Action.
They were going to do this hike of the Appalachian Trail, and they accidentally stumble across the spirit of my character. So he proceeds to methodically kill them off one by one as the movie progresses. He said, I only envision you being in the role of the ghost. You only have one line in the film, and at one point you have this maniacal laugh, so your audition will be, give me this maniacal laugh.
After 2 days of auditions and callbacks, Blaine feels he has found the ideal cast. And by the first rehearsal, he surprises them with good news.
He had mentioned that he had had an investor in the film from the very first day.
The investor was going to be very good for the project.
With the film's cast and financing lined up, rehearsals continue. Brian, the director of photography, Blaine's co-writer and best friend, steps into the picture.
And he's gonna really shoot this thing great.
We had a rehearsal one day. Brian Trimble was there taking headshots for the website. Blaine was making jokes about Brian, you know, when they were introducing each other. You could tell that they had a really good rapport.
He threw up a sheet on the one wall, and it's like, really? I mean, you're supposed to be a professional photographer. You don't have a backdrop.
The investor looked at these headshots, and he said to Blaine, if this is what this guy's headshots look like, he said, I can't even imagine what his film is going to look like when he shoots this movie.
By the next day's rehearsal, Brian and Blaine have some bad news for the cast.
I knew getting into this project that there were going to be pitfalls. They got us all together and told us that we had lost the investor, that the investor wasn't happy. This was Blaine's production, and Brian was his DP.
I just didn't think the investor liked what Blaine was doing, so after several of these arguments, he drops out.
There was definitely a sense of concern.
But ever the entrepreneurs, Blaine and Brian assure the cast they don't need an investor. They believe so strongly in the film, they'll fund it themselves. But first, Brian has to ask his wife, Randy.
Brian wanted to donate $5,000, and Randy said there's absolutely no way that that was going to happen.
Randy won't let Brian spend their money on the film. And within days, the news is even worse.
Brian was not going to physically be able to make the hike up into the woods because he suffered from multiple sclerosis.
According to Brian, it's not his choice. It's his wife, Randy. She is afraid that the rigors of filming on the Appalachian Trail will be too much for him. But that's not her only demand.
You can't leave, man. What am I gonna do?
Brian's the one that had all the cameras, so Blaine was counting on not having that expense.
Come on, this was our dream, man. You know we can do this.
Brian's wife, Randy, said, you know, you're not going to lend your equipment to this guy to go out in the middle of nowhere.
The prospects for Through Hike are looking worse and worse. Without an investor, a cinematographer, and now no camera gear, it seems unlikely production will ever begin. But Blaine surprises everyone with his drive to push on.
So he finances all the equipment on his credit card.
Blaine definitely did have a ton of pressure on him. He was into this really, really deep. He was spending thousands of dollars.
Blaine puts all of his anger on to Randy Brian's right for interfering with the project. The money was almost secondary. Randy didn't support his vision of himself, and therefore that made her an enemy of sorts.
For Blaine Norris, his film is his destiny.
Blaine is single-focused, and he's so obsessed, he just wants to move forward, and he's making decisions that were going to have some dire consequences for him and this project.
We had all these occurrences up front that seemed to be telling us not to make this film.
The dream of making a horror film may have ended for Brian, but not for Blaine, and no one is going to get in his way. How tough is it to realize a dream? How big is the risk? Blaine Norris is betting everything on the success of his horror film. All set to begin filming, Blaine finds out that Brian Trimble, his friend and cinematographer of his movie, is physically unable to shoot. And the hard knocks keep coming. He and his wife even decide to sell their home to pay for the production.
He was living in this apartment and was going to use the capital from his house to finance this film. You're taking a huge risk.
He was so motivated to do this horror film. Come hell or high water, this was going to get done.
Blaine now readies himself for the shoot. But right before filming begins, yet another major roadblock emerges. His lead actress backs out.
We were concerned whether or not the project was going to go forward.
She broke her wrist. Again, don't worry about it, because he had another actress waiting in the wings to come in and take her part.
Any normal person might have seen all of these difficulties, all of these red flags as a sign, at least to take a pause, maybe to not even go forward with this project.
Blaine just brushes it off, so we forge on.
Hey guys, come on, through hike. It's just starting.
And so on August 2nd, 2002, Blaine and company begin filming his horror film, Through Hike. For the cast and crew, the first day of production isn't what they hoped for.
We weren't here to be in the Army. We were here to be in a film, yet it felt like boot camp.
The very first shot we're gonna have is gonna
The first day was tough.
Action.
I mean, really tough. We would shoot things and notice that we had a boom mic operator, almost in every shot.
Cameras rolling.
We shot long hours. I can remember being out till 3 or 4 in the morning, and he'd be the first one up, waking us up. Come on, time to go, time to go.
He would shoot all day long and then stay up all night long watching the dailies, so he wasn't getting very much sleep.
I'm becoming more picky. Like, we reshot that more than we probably needed to.
But by day 3, production is running smoother, even without Brian. Blaine is beginning to realize his dream of becoming a director, and it's a role that seems to suit him perfectly.
Blaine definitely controlled the set. He was very diligent in setting up all the scenes. He knew what he was looking for, and I think he brought out the best in us.
But the big thing is that laugh. You gotta be really scared.
Once we got out on the set, I think there was some transformation in Blaine.
Okay, it's good. You got this.
He was looking upon himself in this director role, almost like a rock star. He has attractive women on the set that he's surrounding himself with. So I think that was the very beginnings of the problem with his marriage.
Blaine was this office nerd, and here he is now the director of what he considers to be this very important film. He felt godlike. He was very important, and that feeling was like a drug, and he really couldn't get enough of it.
For the next 48 hours, the cast and crew work almost around the clock out on the remote Appalachian Trail. And if the pitch darkness and untamed nature aren't unnerving enough, the cast begins to notice something ominous about the script.
I noticed that the way that the characters were laid out on the script, Doug, Eric, Alan, Terry, and Heather, D-E-A-T-H spells death.
I'm out in the middle of the woods with Blaine, and, what am I getting myself into? Can I really, trust this person?
By the 5th day, the stress of filming is taking its toll on Blaine. If only Brian Trimble, his collaborator, had been able to make the trip. But the manic director must push on. There is one last scene to shoot, and tonight, it's Sean's turn to die.
The last scene that we shot
Right on set, cameras rolling.
was my death scene.
Action.
I can't even see 6 inches in front of my face, it's so dark. The ghost possesses my girlfriend. And she repeatedly just stabs me over and over and over again.
I looked over and I saw a watermelon getting stabbed repeatedly.
Harder! Kill it!
To make the sound of a knife going through flesh.
It was so eerie.
Cut. No, that was good.
When we wrapped, all 5 characters were killed, and Samuel Toon is left to roam the woods, setting up the all-important sequel.
After 5 days of blood-curdling screams and numerous deaths, the film finally wraps.
That's a wrap.
And cast and crew return to their normal lives. Blaine is left to edit the film on his own, but it doesn't seem like he's making much progress. And his problems are just beginning.
There was a couple months there where there wasn't really much communication with Blaine. It just wasn't gonna materialize, that we weren't gonna finish the film.
After 3 months of editing, Blaine is making almost no progress. The only thing he is doing well is racking up $20,000 in bills and fighting with his wife.
His wife thought that he was having a relationship with 2 of the actresses that were there, with Amber and Aaron. And there couldn't have been anything further from the truth.
We knew things were going sour with his marriage, so at this point, him and his wife are splitting.
When Blaine transitions from being the director of what he considers to be a very important film, and he goes back home to his average job, his average life, that's a lot to deal with, and it was certainly taking its toll on him.
He would go to work and come home and be faced with all this stuff that was going on, and I couldn't imagine the type of stress that he was under.
Because of his impending divorce, Blaine is even more strapped for cash. He tells everyone he has to put his film on hold. The wannabe filmmaker is again a lonely office dweller, but he reconnects with his co-writer Brian Trimble, and once again, the two appear inseparable. It seems any past wounds have faded away.
All of a sudden, Blaine started showing up again. It was distracting from a coworker perspective because they were always there talking and whispering.
Brian and Blaine are once again drawn together by their shared passion for horror films. But just as they are reuniting, a true horror story emerges.
Oh my God, I just got home. My wife's on the floor. She's bleeding really bad.
Okay, is she conscious?
I don't think so.
What is the price of success? What are its costs? Blaine Norris has suffered huge losses in order to pursue his dream of making his own horror film. He sold his home, racked up personal debt, and ruined his marriage. Blaine now heads back to his day job, where he reunites with his co-writer and one-time cameraman, Brian Trimble. With their past differences behind them, life is returning to normal for the wannabe filmmakers until the evening of January 10th, 2003.
Oh my God, I just got home. My wife's on the floor. She's bleeding really bad.
Okay, is she conscious?
I don't think so.
Is she breathing?
No.
She's not?
No.
All right, we have help on the way for her, okay?
Sorry.
Okay.
I received a call that evening, and they explained to me that it was a death investigation. The husband had found his wife deceased in the home.
It was a small ranch house in a development, a very peaceful neighborhood, and never really had any serious crimes there whatsoever.
I was met by a couple of our uniform officers. The home itself appeared as if it had been ransacked. They advised me that the victim was found in the garage of the home. She appeared to have an extension cord around her neck. There was a large amount of blood.
The attack on Brian's wife, Randy, is so vicious, it feels personal. So they turn to Brian for answers.
The husband had told us that he arrived home from his dinner and he discovered his wife in the garage. He stood on the step and called out towards his wife.
Randy.
When he didn't get a response, he called 911.
Initial reports list the crime scene as the site of a possible burglary, but the detectives aren't so sure.
I had over 25 years on the job at that point, so I'd seen quite a few burglaries. That was a little too clean. It just didn't seem to match a burglary.
Forensics were not a big factor in this case, other than the mere fact that, in the officer's opinion, it was a staged fake burglary.
The young lady that had been killed here was, in fact, a target of that crime.
The autopsy reveals that Randy Trimble has been stabbed 27 times with a small fillet knife. The police aren't investigating a botched burglary anymore. They're searching for a killer.
The police realized when they came across Randy, this was personal, and it wasn't adding up that this would be connected to a burglary. People who kill with knives in such a rageful, forceful way, there's a lot of emotion behind it, and why would a burglar want to kill somebody in this way? It just was an overkill, if you will.
With no obvious suspects, the police want to know Brian's whereabouts at the time of the murder.
The spouse is always a suspect initially.
He had a very good alibi. Everything indicated that he would have been away from the home between the time that the crime was estimated to have taken place. Brian painted a picture of a very loving, caring relationship between he and his wife. They were trying to have a child.
After interviewing Brian, the detectives are no closer to discovering who may have wanted to kill his wife, Randy. So they turn to other friends and family that knew her best.
Who were people that this couple knew, and let's check and see what their relationship was like.
It's a puzzle of sorts, and you try to put the puzzle together. The victim's mother felt they had a happy marriage. Randy was a very hard worker. She was trying to earn as much money as she could because her husband, Brian here, suffered from MS.
After meeting with Randy's family, the detectives begin interviewing Brian's coworkers and friends. And everyone keeps mentioning the name Blaine Norris.
The first time I had any contact with Blaine Norris was on the 21st of January. Blaine explained to me that he was very good friends with Brian.
I met him at the office, and we clicked right away.
They struck up a friendship through work. They had made a film, a horror movie of some sort.
We both really love horror films.
I asked if he minded if we contacted him again in the future if need be. He advised that would not be a problem at all, but feel free to do so.
With no obvious suspects or apparent motives, the police decide to keep a close watch on Randy's husband, Brian, just in case they've missed something. And they are surprised by what they see. People go to unimaginable lengths to achieve their dreams. Action. But when they reach too far, they can lose their way. Blaine Norris and Brian Trimble dreamed of making a horror film. But no one could have imagined the true horror of Brian's wife's murder. With no suspects, the police are keeping an eye on Brian to see if he knows more than he's letting on.
Approximately a month after the crime, Brian started to do things that seemed out of the norm for a grieving husband.
When you get to the point where I don't think he's as innocent as he was, then it started to be, let's just see what his reaction is when you start putting police outside of your home, or you're going up to the door and asking him all kinds of different questions.
Come in. We would stop by the house just to keep him off kilter. He was buying a lot of toys, spending a lot of money. He bought a big screen TV.
That's a nice TV. You know, I always wanted one like that, but my wife, she just won't let me.
Yeah, my wife wouldn't let me have one either.
The police were coming by the corporation, and after the days that the cops were there, Brian was in and out of work.
I'll see you soon.
Because Brian is acting suspiciously, the police ask him to walk them through the night of the crime one more time to see if he'll reveal any new details.
You never left this area right here while you were with 911.
Randy!
Go ahead and sit down there for a second. Go ahead and sit down.
And one of the things that caught our attention was an inconsistency.
He crossed the puddle of blood, and I just put my hand on her coat and just gave her a little nudge. Just see if she'd move or groan or anything, if she didn't do anything.
Initially, he informed us that he never stepped into the garage. Now he's telling us that he had actually stepped down into the garage and shaken his wife.
Randy!
On the night of the incident, he didn't show any signs of having done so. Now he's changing his story.
While Brian's alibi is airtight, the police suspect he knows more about his wife's murder. The district attorney gets a warrant to tap his phone, hoping he'll reveal some secrets.
The wiretap itself provided a lot of corroborating information, but we didn't hear anyone say, I did it, and I gotta do this to get away with it. Doesn't mean you quit. So we continued on. Brian is acting like a typical young man, but not like a grieving husband.
Grieving doesn't look like buying yourself lots of new gadgets, going on a spending spree while you're dating somebody soon after your partner dies. So this looked a little bit odd.
The police now circle back to the beginning of their investigation and interview Brian Trimble's friends one more time.
March 29th, Blaine Norris was interviewed as a routine thing. Again, called person of interest.
Brian's my best friend.
He told me Brian was very much in love with his wife. He did not believe that Brian could hurt anyone.
No, he wouldn't hurt anybody.
But he doesn't just stop there. And what he says next is shocking.
If I had to kill somebody, I would.
You could kill someone?
Yeah, well, it's self-defense, yeah.
Self-defense?
Yes.
In all my years, I can't recall anyone saying, well, yeah, I could kill somebody if I had to.
After the strange comment, police decide to take a harder look at Blaine and begin asking him about his own whereabouts the night of the murder.
Blaine advised us that on the night of the murder itself, he had a dinner date scheduled for 7:30.
No, I was with my girlfriend.
It was comfort to me to know that he wasn't involved in this, that, he had an alibi.
But when the police question Blaine's girlfriend, his alibi is not as solid as he made it out to be.
7:15, she called him and said, don't rush because I'm running behind, so you don't have to be here right then.
We were supposed to originally have dinner at 7:30. I called him on my way home because I was running a little bit late, and he said he was in the area.
Oh, I'm very close by right now, and I'll be over there shortly.
And then he ended up not getting home until after 9. Eventually, it ended up being not until a little after 9 o'clock that we actually had dinner.
He did not arrive at the dinner date as planned until much later in the evening, which contradicted what he had told us. So now we've got two different stories.
But just as the police are focusing in on Blaine, they get an anonymous letter from Randy Trimble's killer.
Kind of out of nowhere, we get a letter addressed to us.
I am Randy Trimble's killer.
Since the police haven't talked to me, I know they're barking up the wrong tree.
I do this for a living.
Why Trimble? Old grudge.
Wake up, locals. Solve cases. Stop screwing up. Signed, Trooper.
Instead of taking the focus off Blaine, the letter has the opposite effect.
It was a fake to draw us away from what we were doing.
We're on the right track because he's doing things he shouldn't be doing.
It's possible that his fantasy life and his real life got merged and mixed together, and it was hard to determine what was the horror flick and what was his real life.
The detectives call Brian back in for questioning, hoping he can give them more information about his buddy Blaine.
I was there in another room. And I'm listening to this, and, they're just confronting him, and he's trembling, and finally, Brian was told, we know you didn't kill her, but you know who did.
Who killed your wife, Brian?
And then he proceeded to tell us that Blaine Norris committed the crime.
Blaine killed my wife.
But how did Brian know Blaine was the murderer? The answer would shock everyone who thought they knew this mild-mannered computer tech. Ambition fuels success, but too much of it can destroy dreams, and the consequences can be deadly. Brian Trimble just admitted that he knows Blaine Norris killed his wife, Randy. But that's not all he has to say.
And he's trembling, and finally, he asked, is the death penalty off the table?
With that strange question hanging in the air, Brian takes a moment. Then he looks the investigators in the eye and tells them that the reason he knows that Blaine killed his wife is very simple. He himself had planned her murder.
And the agreement was made that Brian would provide the investigators with a full statement concerning the circumstances surrounding the murder of Randy Trimble.
For the detectives, the shocking confession is only the beginning of a lurid tale of selfishness, greed, and true horror.
Brian told us, basically he was unhappy with his marriage. Randy, she kind of controlled the purse strings. Again, she was the frugal one who wanted to save money.
But while tension over finances is common among many couples, Brian's resentment towards his wife seems to have begun almost from the first day of their marriage.
For Randy, she was a pragmatist. She thought about the future, saving for the future, being thoughtful about it. For Brian, anything that would interfere with him enjoying the moment, the now, was not considered a positive, and it created a lot of marital strife.
With his bitterness building by the day, it was only a matter of time for Brian's anger to surface. So when his desire to help his friend Blaine make a horror movie was rebuffed, Brian snapped.
She put the kibosh on Brian getting involved in this, crazy project about this movie.
Brian was enraged, and he saw his wife as stopping him from living the best years of his life.
For Brian, divorce was not enough. Shockingly, his solution to his marriage problems was to eliminate Randy. With Randy gone, Brian would be free to do whatever he wanted. And so in August of 2002, a deadly plot began to formulate after Randy unsuspectingly put herself in harm's way between Brian and Blaine.
What's so interesting when it comes to marital homicide is people's relationships are very complex. We expect the very most from our partners, and yet they are the most likely to fail us. And when those expectations fail, it can be deadly.
But the detectives still aren't clear on one important fact. Why would Blaine Norris have agreed to kill Randy Trimble?
Brian had an insurance policy taken out on his wife. Blaine was going to get some money from her life insurance policy, and it just so turned out that it was the exact same amount of money that he was in debt for from Through Hike.
There's only one explanation. I want that $20,000 so I can make my stupid movie. It's so vicious to a person that's just totally innocent.
In the end, Brian took advantage of Blaine's blind ambition to achieve his own devious goal. He got Blaine to kill his wife.
When you look back on this, there's this question of who's the mastermind behind this? Brian is the linchpin. Brian's the one that helps Blaine set this whole thing up. And so Brian is the one who pushes over that first domino.
Next, Brian details how he and Blaine killed Randy. And the real-life horror is worse than any fictitious film.
When I heard the description of the crime itself, it was just bone-chilling.
Brian had Blaine come over, show him the layout of the house. They went over how she was to be killed.
She closed the garage door, and that's when he attacked her with an electric cord, but that didn't work. She got her hand up and was able to push that away. And then he somewhat panicked and just started stabbing her, eventually stabbing her 27 times. So there's just blood everywhere.
And she knew she was dying. She laid there and prayed to God. I just couldn't understand someone doing that to another human being, it's something I'd sooner forget.
With Brian's horrific admission still hanging in the air, investigators need to act quickly. They have one killer in custody, but one is still on the loose.
Brian was placed under arrest. He was criminally charged with the murder of his wife and his involvement in that crime.
East Pennsboro County Police get a search warrant to scour Blaine Norris's apartment for evidence linking him to the crime. And right away, Brian's confession seems to be panning out.
We did find an unusual amount of bills indicating that Blaine was deeply in debt, apparently as a result of him producing this movie. And one of the items found was a receipt from one of the local stores.
And that one piece of paper may hold the answer they need.
They started to get down the list.
A box of 100 latex gloves, black sweatpants, a dark hooded sweatshirt. These items matched what Blaine had with him the night of the murder, but there was no murder weapon.
So the detective does a further check into the credit card to see if any other purchases were made that day.
He was like a little kid at Christmas. You're not gonna believe this. You're not gonna believe this. Tell us you found a knife. We got the knife.
Bingo. Evidence. Blaine, you're done.
In 2003, Blaine Norris and Brian Trimble pled guilty to avoid the death penalty. Both are currently serving life sentences.
Talking about it to this day hurts. To think somebody's life was taken away over a film.
Through Hike right now is sitting in an evidence locker at the East Pennsboro Police Station in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, and will never see the light of day.